If you think no contact works because an avoidant suddenly wakes up, feels deep regret, and runs back full of love, you are already looking at this the wrong way. That is not usually how this plays out. The real shift is quieter, slower, harder to see. An avoidant does not reach out just because you vanished. They reach out because something inside them changes after the pressure is gone and the silence starts speaking louder than the relationship drama ever did. That is the part most people miss. In the beginning, your absence can feel easy to them, even comfortable. But later, that same space can turn into emotional tension they can no longer ignore. And when that happens, the story changes. So stay with me, because this is where most people lose the plot. I am going to show you the 3 deep triggers that can make an avoidant reach out after no contact. Why the timing feels so confusing, why their message is often small and casual instead of emotional, and what their silence is really doing under the surface while you think nothing is happening at all. When it comes to avoidant attachment, one of the biggest mistakes people make is thinking no contact is some magic trick that turns distance into devotion. It does not. It does not suddenly make an avoidant person secure, expressive, soft, and ready to love you the way you always wanted. That fantasy hurts people because it makes them wait for a movie scene that often never comes. What no contact really does is remove the emotional pressure that kept their system locked up. Avoidants do not respond well to intensity. They do not move closer because someone pushes harder, explains more, cries more, or tries to force clarity. Most of the time, that makes them shut down even faster. What they respond to is space, breathing room, silence without pursuit. And when that space lasts long enough, something surprising can happen. The distance they created to protect themselves starts becoming the exact thing that makes them question what they are losing. That is the twist. The silence stops feeling like relief and starts feeling like reality. And reality is much harder to escape than conflict. Keep listening, because the first trigger starts exactly there, in a place that looks calm on the outside, but feels confusing inside. The first trigger is emotional dissonance, and this is one of the most misunderstood parts of the whole no contact process. At the start, many avoidants feel relief, not heartbreak. That truth stings, but it matters. When you stop calling, stop texting, stop asking, stop trying to fix everything, their nervous system often relaxes. The pressure is gone. The emotional demand is gone. The tension drops. So if someone expects instant regret, they usually feel crushed by what looks like indifference. But what is happening is not always indifference. It is often delayed emotion. Avoidants tend to experience separation like an echo that arrives late. First comes relief, then comes confusion, then comes the part they did not expect. As days pass, they may start noticing a strange emptiness they cannot explain. They thought distance would make them feel freer, lighter, more certain. Instead, the silence starts challenging the picture they built in their mind. They told themselves you were too much, too emotional, too demanding, too difficult to satisfy. But now you are gone, and the old story has nothing to push against. You are not chasing. You are not proving their fears right. You are not creating the pressure that helped them stay detached. And that creates friction inside them, because the reality no longer matches the belief. That inner friction is what emotional dissonance really is. It is the uncomfortable gap between what they expected to feel and what they actually feel. They thought, if I get space, I will feel better. But after a while, better does not fully arrive. Instead, there is quiet, then restlessness, then a subtle emotional ache that does not make sense to them at first. This is important because avoidants often rely on distance to confirm their choices. They expect distance to prove they were right. But when distance creates uncertainty instead of peace, their inner logic starts cracking very slowly, very privately. They may not tell anyone. They may not even name it, but they feel it. The lack of pressure removes their excuse to stay emotionally numb. And once the excuse weakens, the mind starts wandering back to you. Not always in a romantic movie way. Sometimes it is much smaller, a moment before sleep, a random thought while driving, a sudden memory when something reminds them of your voice or your energy. This is why no contact can feel dead on the outside while something is quietly building on the inside. And if you have ever wondered why they seem fine at first and unsettled later, this is why. The emotional echo takes time. It lands after the noise is gone. Then comes trigger, and it usually runs even deeper. It is the resurfacing of stored emotional memories. Avoidants are often very good at shutting down in the moment. During a breakup or after conflict, they can look detached, practical, cold, even strangely unaffected. But shutting down is not the same as truly processing what happened. It is often just postponing. That distinction changes everything. Many avoidants do not fully feel the loss in real time. They detach from it. They distract themselves. They stay busy. They move fast. They keep their mind occupied. They tell themselves it was necessary, that it had to happen, that they are better off this way. But the human mind can only suppress so much before something starts leaking back through the cracks. And when the immediate relief fades, the emotional material they pushed down begins to rise. Not all at once at first, just in flashes. A place you used to go together, a song in the background, a smell, a season, a simple quiet evening when there is no one around to distract them from their own mind. Suddenly, the person they thought they had shut away is back in the room with them. Not physically, but emotionally. And because they did not process the loss before, it can hit harder when it returns. This is why memories often come back with more force than people expect. An avoidant may start replaying old conversations, remembering your warmth, your patience, the way you understood them, the way your presence softened something inside them they rarely let anyone touch. They may compare how they felt with you to how they feel now, and that comparison can be sharp. It can catch them off guard because when someone is not used to sitting with feelings, even one honest memory can feel big. A whole wave of them can feel overwhelming. That is when the past stops being just the past and starts becoming emotional evidence. They remember not just what you said, but how they felt around you. And that is where it gets real. Stay with me here because this is the part people miss when they assume silence means nothing. Silence does not always mean emptiness. Sometimes silence is where buried emotion gets loud. The mind starts revisiting what was once avoided. The heart starts responding to what the ego tried to outrun. And the more honest those memories become, the harder it is to stay fully detached. That does not always lead to action right away, but it often creates the emotional pressure that makes reaching out feel possible, maybe even necessary. Now, the third trigger is the deepest one, and for many avoidants, it is the one that changes the whole dynamic. It is the loss of perceived control. Avoidants need to feel emotionally safe, self-contained, and in control of distance. They want to feel like they are choosing when to come close and when to pull away. That sense of control protects them. It keeps them from feeling exposed. But when you go into real no contact, not as a game, not as a tactic, not as a short performance designed to make them react, but as a true step back, something powerful happens. You stop playing the role they gave you. In their mind, you may have been the one who cared more, the one who reached out, the one who tried to fix things, the one who would always still be there. They expected your pursuit to remain available in the background even if they never said it. That expectation becomes part of their emotional safety. So when your silence becomes steady and real, the structure shifts. Suddenly, they are no longer in full control of the connection. You become unreadable, unavailable in a way they did not prepare for. And that is deeply unsettling to someone who depends on emotional distance to feel secure. At first, they may assume your silence is temporary. They may think you are waiting, watching, hoping, and that you will eventually return to the same pattern. But when the quiet continues and you do not rush back into the old role, their certainty begins to fade. This is where curiosity starts growing, then uncertainty, then a very specific fear. Not always panic, not always dramatic heartbreak, but fear of losing access. Fear that the connection they thought they could revisit later may not be there anymore. Fear that the person who once gave them warmth, understanding, comfort, and emotional safety may now be gone for real. That realization can hit the avoidant ego in a powerful way, because what disappears is not just a person. It is access to a familiar emotional space they quietly depended on more than they admitted. And this is why real no contact changes the power dynamic so strongly. It proves without saying a word that you are not emotionally trapped in the role they assigned to you. You are no longer filling every silence. You are no longer making their distance easy. You are no longer carrying the whole emotional weight of the bond. And when they feel that shift, it can become the strongest internal push toward contact. But here is the part you need to understand clearly. Avoidants usually do not reach out in the way people fantasize about. They often do not send a long emotional confession. They do not always come back with perfect clarity, full accountability, and a transformed heart. Most of the time, they reach out in small, low-risk ways. A casual message, a random joke, a meme, a simple, "Hey, I hope you are doing okay." A question that looks almost pointless on the surface. These small messages matter because they are often emotional temperature checks. They are testing the space. They want to know if the connection still exists without stepping into emotional intensity too fast. They want closeness, but closeness still scares them. They want reassurance, but not a flood. They want access, but with an exit door still open. So if their message seems light, vague, or strangely ordinary, that does not always mean it is meaningless. Sometimes it means this is the safest way they know how to move. Small contact is often their version of a big risk. And if you respond with pressure, demands, or instant emotional weight, they may retreat again because the safety they were testing for suddenly disappears. That is why consistency matters so much during no contact. Not coldness, not cruelty, not trying to punish them, just calm consistency. When your silence is stable instead of reactive, it changes how they read you. You no longer look like someone trying to pull them back every second. You look emotionally grounded. That creates a different kind of safety in the avoidant mind. And yes, it is ironic. The very thing many people fear most, silence, can become the thing that makes an avoidant feel safe enough to look back, because now they are not expecting a wave of emotion the moment they open the door. They are not expecting to be pulled into pressure, guilt, or demand. They begin to believe that contact might not trap them. And once that belief grows, their defensive wall can lower just enough for their real feelings to come through. Not all at once, not perfectly, but enough to make movement possible. This is also why chasing usually backfires. Pursuit can keep their defenses active. Space can make them feel what pursuit prevented them from feeling. If this is hitting home for you, keep going, because the next part is where clarity gets even sharper. The deeper truth is that avoidants do not usually reach out because you disappeared. They reach out because you stopped feeding the story they relied on. You stopped proving that they had endless access to you. You stopped making it easy for them to stay emotionally split with one foot in and one foot out. You stopped being predictable in the old way. And once that happened, your absence became a mirror. It reflected something back to them they could no longer avoid. It showed them what they actually felt when they were no longer distracting themselves with your effort. This is why no contact is not about winning. It is about revealing. It reveals their emotional truth. It reveals your strength. It reveals whether the bond had real depth or whether you were carrying almost all of it alone. That is a hard truth, but it is a freeing one, because silence does not just test them. It tests the connection itself, and the result tells you something valuable either way. If they never reach out, that tells you something. If they do reach out only for comfort without growth, that tells you something too. Clarity is not always the same as reunion. Sometimes clarity is seeing the bond exactly as it was, not as you hoped it would become. There is also another layer most people do not think about. Avoidants often do not break in the first week. In fact, the early stage may be the easiest stage for them. The pressure is off, the system cools down, the noise is gone. But later, when the silence becomes normal instead of dramatic, it starts changing shape. It stops feeling like space and starts feeling like absence. It stops feeling like relief and starts feeling like loss. That is when the old stories start failing. They can no longer keep saying you were too much if you are not there doing anything at all. They can no longer tell themselves they needed distance from pressure if the pressure has fully disappeared and yet something still feels off. That is when emotional truth begins pressing on them from the inside. Very few avoidants enjoy sitting in that space. It is unfamiliar, uncomfortable, honest, and honesty is often the hardest place for a defended person to live. So, the silence grows louder. The questions grow sharper. The emotional cost of distance becomes harder to deny. That is often the moment when they begin to check your social media, revisit old messages in their mind, or think about sending something simple just to reopen a thread. And let's make one thing very clear, because this part matters. These triggers are not tricks you can force. They are not buttons you press to make someone want you. If you treat no contact like a manipulation strategy, you usually ruin the very energy that makes it work. Real no contact works because it is real, because you actually step back, because you stop trying to engineer every outcome, because you allow the truth of the connection to breathe without your constant effort holding it together. That is powerful. It means you are no longer trying to drag awareness out of someone. You are allowing reality to do the job. And reality is often stronger than persuasion. If they valued you, they feel the shift. If they depended on your presence more than they admitted, they feel the gap. If they buried feelings instead of processing them, those feelings often rise when silence gives them room. But if nothing moves, that also gives you information you need. This is why no contact is as much about your healing as it is about their awakening. It pulls you out of chasing and puts you back into self-respect. It asks a hard question. Was this a mutual connection? Or were you carrying the emotional load for two people? So if you are in no contact right now, remember this. Do not measure everything by week 1. Do not assume relief means they never cared. Do not panic if nothing happens right away. Avoidants often move in delayed waves, not dramatic bursts. What looks quiet may be processing. What looks cold may be defended. What looks stable may actually be cracking underneath. But at the same time, do not turn their psychology into your prison. Your job is not to sit still forever waiting for a breadcrumb. Your job is to return to your center, hold your dignity, and let reality reveal what is true. If they reach out, you will be able to see it more clearly from a grounded place. If they do not, you will still have your answer. And that answer matters because the goal is not just to be contacted. The goal is to stop abandoning yourself in the hope that someone else finally stops abandoning their feelings. That is the real shift. And once you understand that, no contact becomes more than silence. It becomes a reset of your energy, your standards, and your ability to see love without pressure, without fantasy, and without forcing what should have flowed more naturally. In the end, the 3 triggers are simple, but they cut deep. Emotional dissonance makes the old story stop making sense. Resurfacing emotional memories brings back feelings they delayed instead of processed. Loss of perceived control makes the distance feel real in a way they can no longer manage so easily. And when those 3 forces start working together, an avoidant may feel pulled to reach out, not because they suddenly changed overnight, but because their defense is lowered enough for reality to get through. That is the key. Not magic, not instant transformation, just reality finally becoming louder than avoidance. And if they do reach out, watch the energy, not just the words. Look for steadiness, not just curiosity. Look for openness, not just access. Look for effort, not just a test. Because a message is not always a changed pattern. Still, understanding these triggers gives you something even more valuable than hope. It gives you clarity. And clarity is what protects your peace. If this opened your eyes, hold on to the lesson. Stop forcing. Stop chasing. Stop filling every silence for them. Let the truth speak. Let the distance reveal what pressure hid. And let your calm become stronger than your fear. Because that is often the moment the whole story finally changes.